The room went silent the moment I walked in. My mother said it without shock, without question. "You changed your name." Every head turned. My father's hand clenched the chair, my sister froze, my brother stopped laughing mid-step. And me, I held the invitation to my own engagement in my hand, my new name printed in black. "Before we start, hit subscribe for more real-life stories you won't believe." I stood there in the chapel entrance, watching their faces shift from confusion to recognition to something darker. The invitation felt heavy in my palm, the cream-colored paper warm against my skin. Around us, other mourners began filtering in, their quiet conversations creating a soft murmur that only emphasized the silence radiating from my family. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father's knuckles went white against the wooden chair. Vivian's eyes widened, searching my face for an explanation I had no intention of providing. Brendan's laughter died in his throat, leaving behind an awkward half-smile that faded quickly. The name printed on the invitation, Evelyn Morrison, stared back at all of us. I grew up learning to shrink. Noise meant attention, and attention never belonged to me. Brendan got louder praise for average accomplishments. Vivian got warm hugs just for existing. And me, I got overlooked, dismissed, forgotten in plain sight. Our house in Austin operated on a hierarchy I never consciously learned but always understood. The loudest voices got heard. The brightest smiles got noticed. The quietest presence got passed over like furniture. I learned early to clean my own messes, pack my own lunches, sign my own permission slips. My mother's attention was a spotlight that never quite found me, always swinging toward my siblings with an ease that felt as natural to her as breathing. My father existed in a perpetual state of distraction, his eyes on his phone or his work or the television, rarely landing on me long enough to register my presence. I became a ghost in my own home, visible only when I made myself useful. Hold this. Clean that, be quiet, move over, shrink. I remember my 10th birthday like a wound that never fully healed. I woke up early that Saturday, excitement buzzing through my small body despite years of training that should have taught me better. I made my own banner, carefully coloring each letter with markers I had bought with my allowance. I tied balloons to the mailbox, hung streamers across the living room, wrote every friend's name on handmade place cards. I even attempted a cake, a lopsided chocolate disaster that I decorated with shaking hands and fierce hope. When Mom came downstairs, she walked past without a glance, her phone pressed to her ear as she discussed Vivian's upcoming dance recital. "Hold Vivian's jacket," she said, draping the soft fabric over my outstretched arms without breaking stride. I stood there for 20 minutes, holding that jacket, watching my birthday decorations sway slightly in the air conditioning. That day I learned my place in the family ecosystem, quiet, unseen, unimportant, a supporting character in other people's stories. Middle school was no different. Awards, contests, certificates, they came and went, unnoticed by the people who should have cared most. I won 3rd place in the regional spelling bee. The certificate went into my desk drawer, hidden beneath homework assignments and forgotten permission slips. I made honor roll every semester for 3 years. No one asked to see the report cards I brought home, already signed in my mother's handwriting that I had learned to forge with disturbing accuracy. I joined the debate team and placed at competitions. Brendan's baseball games filled the family calendar in thick black marker while my events existed in pencil, easily erased when something more important came along. I learned to celebrate quietly, to feel pride without external validation, to understand that my achievements were mine alone. The high school years brought more of the same pattern, worn smooth by repetition, until it felt like the only reality I had ever known. Empty seats at award ceremonies became expected. Forgotten birthdays became normal. I stopped waiting for them to remember. High school graduation parties, birthdays, family dinners, same story repeated with minor variations. Empty seats burned with a familiar ache I had learned to carry like an old injury. My 16th birthday came and went with a grocery store cake and a card signed in my mother's handwriting for all 3 of them. My junior year awards ceremony featured a conspicuously empty row where my family should have sat. I walked across that stage alone, surrounded by strangers' applause, and felt nothing but the dull throb of expectation meeting reality. My senior prom happened without the traditional photos because everyone had scattered to their own obligations by the time I came downstairs in my dress. I took a selfie in the hallway mirror and drove myself to the school. Later, I saw Brendan's Instagram post from a baseball game that had run conveniently late. No one mentioned the timing. The ache was familiar by then, predictable as weather, part of the background noise of my life. I learned to expect nothing and was rarely disappointed. College didn't change much despite my naive hope that distance might reset our patterns. Rice University offered physical separation, but emotional dynamics stretched across state lines like elastic, snapping me back into familiar roles whenever I tried to move forward. I sent reminders about awards ceremonies, departmental presentations, research symposiums. Each notification appeared in the family group chat like a message in a bottle, floating hopefully into an ocean of indifference. Vivian sent emojis, strings of hearts and clapping hands that required no thought or commitment. Brendan ignored the messages entirely, leaving them on read if he bothered to open them at all. Mom nodded without looking up from her phone during our infrequent calls, murmuring vague encouragement that could have applied to anything or nothing. Each ignored message taught me the same lesson I had been learning since childhood. Wait for no one, rely on no one, protect your peace because no one else would protect it for you. I graduated summer come Lord to a nearly empty auditorium section marked family. When I announced my engagement, I told myself this time would be different. This was major, undeniable, the kind of life event that families rallied around in movies and television shows and other people's Instagram posts. I crafted the message carefully. March 15th, 3 p.m. a simple, clear message with the date and time, spelled out completely to eliminate any possible confusion. I hit send and watched the blue check marks appear as each family member read the announcement. Hours crawled by. My phone sat on my desk, silent and accusatory. Finally, notifications began trickling in with familiar inadequacy. Hours later, Mom texted, "Congratulations, honey," with a single heart emoji that felt like the bare minimum of acknowledgement. Vivian sent a thumbs up. Brendan, silence, complete, unbroken silence that somehow communicated more than words ever could. I stared at my phone screen until the letters blurred, feeling something inside me begin to crack in a way that felt less like breaking and more like finally letting go of something I should have released years ago. Weeks went by with painful slowness, reminders sent with decreasing hope and increasing precision. 5 weeks out, just a reminder, March 15th at 3 p.m. for my engagement party. 3 weeks, 1 month away, hope you've marked your calendars. 1 week, this Sunday at 3 p.m, can't wait to see you all there. 2 days, the day after tomorrow, see you soon. Each message met with silence or vague acknowledgements that promised nothing and delivered less. They weren't confused about the date or the time or the location I had sent in 4 separate messages. They weren't busy with unmovable obligations. They simply chose not to care, chose not to prioritize, chose not to show up for me the way they showed up for each other without hesitation. The night before my engagement party, I lay awake staring at my ceiling, my phone clutched in one hand like a talisman that had lost its protective power. At midnight, it buzzed. Brendan had forwarded something to the family group chat. Night before, Brendan forwarded a chat. Family engagement dinner, 3 p.m, be there. The message included an address for a restaurant across town, not my party, someone else's celebration, same day, same exact time. The conflict was so blatant it felt almost intentional, like the universe was holding up a mirror and forcing me to see what I had been avoiding for 26 years. I called him immediately, my hands shaking as I pressed his contact. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice casual and unconcerned, the sound of laughter and music in the background. "Hey, what's up?" he said, like he hadn't just confirmed every fear I had carried since childhood. "My engagement party is at 3, I said slowly, each word deliberate. March 15th, 3 in the afternoon, I've sent 12 reminders. There was a pause, the kind of silence that revealed more than words. "Oh," he said finally. "Can't people do both?" Confused when I called. I didn't argue, I didn't explain, I didn't cry or yell, I hung up. The red button felt final under my thumb. I arrived early the next afternoon. The venue was exactly as I had envisioned it, soft light filtering through tall windows, tables covered in cream linens, small arrangements of white roses giving off a delicate fragrance. The air smelled of flowers and soft perfume, of new beginnings and carefully constructed hope. Tables gleamed under the afternoon sun. I clutched my invitation tightly, the paper damp from my palm. Evelyn Morrison. The name I had chosen, the identity I had built in the quiet spaces they never bothered to occupy. Guests began arriving, friends from graduate school, colleagues from my first job, people who had shown up for me in ways my family never had. They embraced me with genuine warmth. They admired the venue. They asked about my fiancé with real interest. I smiled and answered and felt something inside me begin to settle. At 3:15, the door opened. My family walked in together, a unified front that fractured the moment they saw me standing near the entrance. They arrived late, Mom's eyes widened as her gaze moved from my face to the invitation displayed on the welcome table. You changed your name, she said, not a question, a verdict delivered with cold certainty. My father's hand gripped the back of a nearby chair, his knuckles whitening with tension. Vivian stopped mid-step, her mouth falling open. Brendan's casual smile died on his face, replaced by something that might have been shame if he were capable of it. Around us, conversations quieted as guests turned to watch this small family drama unfold in real time. My mother's voice had carried farther than she intended, sharp enough to cut through music and gentle chatter. I smiled faintly, the expression not reaching my eyes. I did what I had to, I said, my voice calm and measured. They expected drama. They expected tears and raised voices and the kind of emotional scene that would let them paint me as unreasonable, as overreacting, as too sensitive. I gave them quiet instead. I gave them the undeniable truth delivered without theatrics. I remembered every missed milestone, every ignored achievement, every empty chair that had marked the important moments of my life like gravestones in a cemetery I was forced to visit alone. The science fair in 6th grade, where I waited for an hour after my presentation ended, hoping they would show up late rather than not at all. The high school graduation, where they arrived during the closing remarks, having stopped for coffee on the way. The college awards ceremony, where 5 reserved seats remained empty while I accepted recognition for research that would eventually become my thesis. Each memory was catalogued with clinical precision, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. Silence became my armor, hammered into shape by years of small rejections that taught me to expect nothing and protect everything. Each ignored message taught me the same essential lesson: don't rely on anyone else for recognition, validation, or proof of your own worth. Build those foundations yourself, because no one else is coming to help you. That night I opened my laptop and created a folder I titled simply Transition. Inside I began gathering documents with methodical precision. Legal name change petition downloaded and printed. Financial account information compiled into spreadsheets tracking every connection to my old identity. Email addresses mapped in careful columns, old and new, public and private. Medical records, contact information, emergency notifications. Every piece of paper and digital file that tied me to the name Evelyn Brennan was catalogued here, waiting for systematic dismantling. Legal petition printed, the pages still warm from the printer. Financial accounts updated one by one, passwords changed, contact information modified. Emails changed to addresses that contained no trace of my family name. Every document tied to my old name reorganized, archived, or scheduled for deletion. Step by step, precise, deliberate. This was not revenge, I told myself as I worked through the night. This was not spite or punishment. This was order imposed on chaos. This was control reclaimed from people who had wielded it carelessly for too long. Not revenge. Order, just order. I packed my Austin apartment with the same methodical efficiency, wrapping my life in newspaper and packing tape. Books stacked in boxes, their spines aligned with precision. Clothes folded and layered in suitcases according to season and frequency of use. Frames wrapped carefully, their faces turned down so I wouldn't have to see the memories they held. My phone buzzed endlessly on the kitchen counter, the screen lighting up with increasing desperation. Missed calls from my mother appearing in double digits. Desperate texts from Vivian asking where I was, what I was doing, why I wasn't responding. Brendan's messages started apologetic and grew frustrated as my silence stretched from hours into days. My father, characteristically, sent money instead of words, a transfer to my old account with a note attached, for whatever you need. I left it untouched, ignored. I sealed the last box and stacked it with the others. Drove north for 2 days, stopping only for gas and bad coffee at rest stops that smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Every mile, the past dissolved behind me like fog burning off in morning sun. Portland welcomed me softly with grey skies and gentle rain that felt like a blessing after the harsh Texas sun. My apartment was small but bright, tucked into a quiet building on a tree-lined street where people nodded politely, but didn't pry. Windows overlooked quiet streets where people walked dogs and pushed strollers and lived ordinary lives that didn't require drama or confrontation. The environmental consulting firm, where I had accepted a position months earlier, welcomed me with warm handshakes and genuine smiles. New emails appeared in my inbox addressed to Evelyn Morrison. New colleagues introduced themselves without comparing me to siblings or asking pointed questions about my family. Work began with projects that challenged me, with people who listened when I spoke, with a rhythm that felt sustainable rather than exhausting. New life as Evelyn Morrison unfolded day by day, each small moment reinforcing that I had made the right choice. No one here knew Evelyn Brennan. No one here expected me to shrink or wait or accept less than I deserved. I was simply Evelyn, competent and present, finally visible. Evenings in Portland passed with gentle quietness that felt like healing. I brewed coffee in my small kitchen, the sound of water filling the silence in ways that felt peaceful rather than empty. Rain tapped against windows while I worked at my desk, reviewing environmental impact reports and water reclamation models. I sat on my narrow balcony wrapped in blankets, watching the city lights blur through mist, feeling the tight knot in my chest begin to loosen one breath at a time. Coffee, rain, work, a simple rhythm that belonged entirely to me. My coworker Alex invited me for drinks after work, and I went, discovering that conversation could be easy when both people were actually listening. We talked about projects and books and the strange adjustment of moving to a new city. He didn't ask about my family. I didn't offer. Slowly, the ache that had lived in my chest for 26 years began to fade like a bruise healing in stages. The empty chair that had haunted every achievement no longer appeared in my dreams. Silence became mine, not a punishment but a choice, not an absence but a presence I controlled. Months later, I returned to Austin for Great Aunt Ruth's funeral. She had been one of the few people who truly saw me, who sent birthday cards that arrived on time, who asked about my research with genuine interest. I owed her this final goodbye, even if it meant facing the family I had left behind. The chapel smelled of lilies and furniture polish, familiar scents that triggered memories I had been trying to forget. I arrived early, slipping into the second row before anyone else appeared. The program they handed me at the door featured my name in the family section. Evelyn Morrison. I sat in the second row, my hands folded around the program, watching other mourners file in with quiet respect. Then the door opened and my family entered together, a unified front that cracked the moment they saw me. Their faces cycled through emotions too quickly to catalogue: surprise, confusion, recognition, something that might have been fear. They arrived looking like they had dressed in a hurry, their faces drawn with genuine grief for Ruth mixed with something else when their eyes landed on me. They arrived and stopped in their tracks. Mom's eyes moved from my face to the program in my hand, reading the name printed there with growing comprehension. Shocked, her face went pale, then flushed. "You should have told us," Mom whispered harshly, leaning close enough that other mourners wouldn't hear, but her anger was palpable. Her voice carried that particular tone of wounded authority, the implication that I had committed some grave offense against natural order by making decisions about my own life without consulting her first. She expected an apology, expected me to feel ashamed, expected me to shrink the way I always had. I replied calmly, my voice steady and quiet. "You chose not to care. I chose to be seen." The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples that spread outward into uncomfortable silence. My father's jaw tightened. Vivian's eyes filled with tears that I had no interest in comforting. Brendan stood frozen, perhaps finally understanding that actions had consequences even when those consequences took years to arrive. The chapel attendant signaled for quiet. The service began. We sat in tense silence. No tears fell from my eyes during the service. I mourned Ruth genuinely, the only family member who had consistently shown up for me without conditions or expectations. But I felt nothing for the people sitting nearby, watching me more than they watched the ceremony honoring a woman they had barely visited in her final years. No arguments erupted in the chapel because I refused to engage, refused to explain, refused to perform the emotional labor they had always expected from me. After the service ended, my mother tried to corner me in the parking lot. My father attempted awkward conversation. Vivian reached for my arm with trembling hands. I stepped back from each approach, maintaining physical distance that mirrored the emotional boundaries I had built. I walked away without looking back, my rental car keys already in my hand. Boundaries drawn with the precision of legal documents and system updates. Systems recognized me now: banks, employers, medical providers, government databases. Papers, emails, legal filings confirmed my existence independent of people who had spent decades forgetting I was there. My existence no longer depended on anyone who had forgotten me, who had chosen barbecues over dissertations, who had sent emojis instead of showing up, who had made me feel invisible in my own family. The systems I navigated daily: employment records, bank accounts, medical files. Legal documents, all recognized Evelyn Morrison as a complete person with emergency contacts who actually answered their phones, with references who could speak to my character, with a history that didn't require family validation. I had rebuilt my entire life in a name they didn't recognize, in a city they had never visited, surrounded by people who saw me clearly without needing years of context or explanation. The empty chairs that had marked my life like punctuation marks in a sad sentence no longer mattered because I had learned to fill my own spaces. I had learned to show up for myself with the consistency my family never managed. I had learned that blood relation was not the same as family, that DNA did not obligate me to accept treatment I would never tolerate from strangers. For the first time in my 26 years, silence wasn't empty. It was mine. Not the silence of being overlooked or forgotten, but the deliberate quiet of someone who had learned to protect their peace at any cost. The silence of a phone that didn't buzz with desperate messages from people who only noticed my absence when it became inconvenient for them. The silence of evenings spent reading on my balcony without the anxiety of waiting for acknowledgement that would never come. The silence of a life built on foundations I had laid myself, with people I had chosen, in places that felt like home because I had made them so. This silence was full rather than empty, rich rather than hollow, mine rather than imposed. I sat in my Portland apartment on a rainy evening, working on a water reclamation proposal that would impact thousands of lives, and felt something like contentment settle into my chest. No one was coming to validate this work. No one was coming to celebrate this achievement. And for the first time, that was perfectly fine because I had learned to be enough for myself. Back in Portland, life continued its gentle rhythm. Work projects progressed with satisfying momentum. The water reclamation proposal I had been developing was accepted for pilot implementation, a professional victory I celebrated with Alex and other colleagues over dinner at a small restaurant downtown. My fiancé visited for a long weekend, and we walked through Powell's books for hours, discussing wedding plans that didn't include a family section on my side. He understood, or tried to, in the way that people from functional families struggle to comprehend the deliberate severing of ties. "Do you miss them?" he asked one night, his arm around my shoulders as we watched rain streak down the window. I considered the question honestly. "I miss the idea of what they should have been," I said slowly. "But I don't miss who they actually were. I don't miss feeling invisible. I don't miss the empty chairs." He kissed my temple and didn't push for more. That was enough. My small apartment filled with chosen family, co-workers who became friends, neighbors who remembered my name, a community built on presence rather than obligation. The old phone I had kept in a drawer buzzed one final time months after I had returned from Ruth's funeral. I pulled it out, powered it on, and watched 83 missed calls and countless text messages load in waves. My mother's voicemails had evolved from angry to pleading to resigned. Vivian's texts cycled through guilt and accusations. Brendan sent a single message, "This is extreme." My father's contribution was characteristically brief, "Your mother is upset." I listened to a few voicemails, feeling nothing but distant curiosity at the desperation in their voices. They wanted me back not because they missed me, but because my absence created an uncomfortable void in their narrative. They wanted the supporting character back in her place, shrinking in corners, holding jackets, accepting scraps of attention like gifts. I deleted everything without responding, powered off the phone, and dropped it in a donation box on my way to work the next morning. Someone else could have it. Someone else could deal with those numbers. I was done. As months turned into a full year, the person I had been, Evelyn Brennan, the invisible daughter, became more memory than identity. Evelyn Morrison was real in ways that girl had never been allowed to be. I was loud in meetings when I had ideas worth sharing. I took up space without apologizing. I formed friendships based on mutual respect rather than blood obligation. My wedding was small, intimate, filled with people who had consistently shown up for me. The photos showed no empty seats because everyone who was invited actually came. My fiancé's family welcomed me with warmth that felt foreign at first, asking about my work and my interests and listening to the answers. His mother hugged me at the rehearsal dinner and said, "We're so glad you're joining our family." I cried in the bathroom afterward, overwhelmed by the simple act of being wanted. This was what family could be, I realized. This was what I had been missing. Not the DNA connection, but the consistent choice to show up, to see, to value. The transformation was complete not in one dramatic moment, but in countless small ones. The day I realized I hadn't thought about my biological family in weeks. The evening I laughed freely at a dinner party without the old anxiety of being too loud, too present, too much. The morning I signed documents at work as Evelyn Morrison without the slight hesitation that had plagued me for months. I had become someone new. Or perhaps I had finally become who I was always meant to be without the weight of their expectations and dismissals, shaping me into someone smaller and quieter and less The empty chairs that had defined my past were gone, replaced by full rooms and genuine connections, and the revolutionary experience of being seen. I learned that boundaries weren't punishments but acts of self-preservation, that silence could be powerful rather than painful, that family was defined by action rather than biology. My mother was wrong that day in the chapel. I hadn't changed my name to hurt them. I had changed it to save myself, and in doing so I had finally, truly come home. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and hit the bell. You won't want to miss the next one.